Hello, this is Dr. San Jose. There's a certain weight that comes with the word union, especially when applied to teachers. For many, it's a symbol of protection and solidarity. Yet the reality is far more complicated than slogans or banners. Teachers, like anyone else, want fairness in their workplace, security for their jobs, and a safeguard when times get tough. The union ideally acts as that guarantee. But just as in any system fueled by human hands and decisions, cracks can form. Let's start with the undeniable truth. Not every union leader has lived up to the values their members trusted them with. There have been cases where treasurers siphoned off funds meant to protect classrooms, or presidents lined their own pockets while their members struggled to pay for supplies. These stories grab headlines, and for good reason, because they slice deep into the one thing unions must cherish most: trust. When trust gets fractured, it spreads like a ripple through the teaching community. A teacher who once felt their dues empowered change begins to question whether they were simply funding someone else's greed. But should the actions of a few overshadow the millions of teachers depending on that same system? That's where the balance lies, between accountability and acknowledgement that corruption does not define the entirety. Why is it that people are so quick to dismiss unions when a scandal emerges? Perhaps it's because we expect unions to embody the very ideals teachers themselves strive for: honesty, fairness, shaping a better future. When leaders violate that, the betrayal feels heavier than in other organizations. After all, if you can't trust those who represent educators, who can you trust? On the flip side, unions have been lifelines for teachers facing unfair layoffs, wage stagnation, or even threats from political systems that undervalue public education. In many cases, they are the difference between a teacher keeping their job or being pushed out without cause. This duality, unions as both saviors and sometimes saboteurs, creates an uneasy tension no easy headline can capture. Consider retirement plans, one of the sore spots critics point to. Some unions encouraged educators to put savings into investments with high hidden fees, eroding the very pensions teachers thought were secure. Can you imagine dedicating decades to nurturing young minds only to discover your golden years are eroded by fine print you never had a chance to negotiate? The lesson here isn't that unions are inherently bad. It's that even the well-intentioned must constantly be watched, questioned, and held accountable. Teachers don't enter the profession for financial gain. They enter it for love of students, knowledge, and the belief in giving back. But their sacrifices make them vulnerable to exploitation. A strong union amplifies their voice. A careless or self-serving one exploits their faith. Which one a teacher experiences can shape their entire career. One aspect often overlooked is how unions influence education reforms. Many times, unions push back against changes that could potentially raise student test outcomes, but at the cost of teachership stability. Is it fair to resist reforms to protect jobs, even if those reforms might help children? That's the eternal tug of war. Do we prioritize students' futures or teacher security, and is it possible to have both without compromise? It's easy for outside critics to scoff and call unions stubborn. But imagine standing in front of 30 students every day, balancing limited resources, unpredictable policies, and societal expectations. Wouldn't you also fight to protect your job, your benefits, and your peace of mind? The conflict isn't as simple as pro or anti-reform. It's survival versus idealism. Some advocates say unions lean too heavily on politics, channeling dues into campaigns instead of classrooms. Teachers find themselves funding causes they may not personally support. Should a fifth-grade science teacher in Iowa really see her hard-earned dues supporting a distant politician she doesn't believe in? The controversy boils down to choice and representation. Are teachers' voices guiding these decisions, or are leaders deciding for them? Despite controversy, unions provide a voice teachers can scarcely afford to lose. Without that shield, how many more educators would suffer in silence when their administrators cut corners, or when lawmakers propose policies that make teaching unbearable? What's often forgotten is that unions are not some outside force. They are made of the very teachers they represent, sitting in staff rooms, grading papers at night, and worrying about paying mortgages. However, the distance between leadership and everyday members sometimes feels almost unbridgeable. A local teacher wondering why her dues are rising may not see the connection to decisions made at national conferences she never attends. This disconnect invites resentment. It feels like a vote cast by proxy, but without the power to opt out. Is dismantling unions the answer? Probably not. If unions vanished overnight, teachers would lose their bargaining power, protections against arbitrary firings, and the leverage to advocate for better working conditions. But just as dangerous as ignoring the flaws within unions and pretending the problems don't exist, both extremes do more harm than good. This brings us to a simple truth. Unions must evolve. If they cling too hard to the past or guard their own power more than their members, they risk becoming the very institutions they once fought against. Teachers deserve transparent systems, leaders with integrity, and retirement plans that won't collapse under hidden fees. Perhaps the hardest part of this conversation is remembering that unions are not faceless. Behind every controversy is a leader who made a choice, and behind every membership list is a teacher who is just trying to do what's best for themselves and their students. When one hurts the other, the system weakens for all. Teachers deserve to see their money at work, not buried in financial scandals, not propping up empty politicians, but fueling better pay, safer classrooms, and improved educational outcomes. To restore full trust, unions need to make their accounting as clear as a lesson plan. Teachers don't want complicated charts. They want to see their investment in real time. Maybe the heart of the issue is that education itself is emotional. Teachers' dreams, students' futures, and society's hopes all meet in one profession. So when unions falter, the disappointment echoes far louder than in others. It feels personal. A flawed bank frustrates people. A flawed union devastates people. It can change whether someone stays in a profession they love or walks away burned out. What about the success stories? They exist too, though headlines rarely mention them. Times when unions secured smaller class sizes that allowed teachers to better connect with students, or when they negotiated health benefits that saved lives. These victories matter, but often get overshadowed. Shouldn't we be talking more about the wins as well as the losses? Maybe you're wondering, how can we, the public, help? The simplest act is asking the right questions instead of parroting surface-level critiques. Who benefits from reforms unions resist? Who benefits when teachers stand together? When you widen your lens beyond isolated scandals, you begin to see that the bigger picture is far more complex. It's important to remember how quickly doubt can grow. A single embezzlement case can feed stereotypes that unions are corrupt across the board. That's unfair to thousands of union leaders who serve honestly, volunteering countless hours without personal gain. But that's the unfortunate weight of collective reputation. What one does, all carry. So the question isn't whether we need unions, but how to keep them honest and useful. System checks, transparent leadership, and direct member involvement are not luxuries. They're essentials. As long as decisions that affect teachers' lives are made, those teachers deserve a seat at the table and a clear voice in the process. When I think about this whole debate, the key lesson that surfaces is about vigilance. Teachers cannot just join a union and walk away blindly. True protection requires participation. The louder teachers speak, the harder it is for leaders to misuse their voice. Silence, on the other hand, grants power to a select few who may not use it responsibly. It's easy to think unions exist disconnected from you, but consider this. Every child's education is shaped by how supported their teachers feel. A teacher who feels secure does better work. A teacher who feels betrayed by their own system inevitably suffers, and so do their students. That ripple effect stretches far beyond a paycheck. In the end, the conversation about union controversies isn't about painting them as heroes or villains. It's about facing reality, warts and all, while remembering why unions exist in the first place. At their best, they are shields, advocates, and lifelines. At their worst, they can be barriers, distractions, and even sources of disillusionment. Both truths live side by side. If you've watched this far, thank you for lending your time. Share this discussion with a friend, subscribe to keep learning, and comment with your own perspective. Are you a teacher, a parent, or a student who has seen unions at work? Be part of our global team by sharing your experiences, because these stories help us all understand not just the failures, but the victories and the path forward. This is Dr. San Jose. Thank you for being part of this conversation, for reflecting, and for investing your energy in something that matters. If this message resonates, share it. Subscribe to more discussions that keep wisdom alive, and leave your comments below. Be part of our global team by sharing your experiences of listening to others who thought differently. Together, these shared stories plant seeds of understanding the world desperately needs.